Let's move to graduation requirements committee.
I'm writing a note. Give me 1 second.
Can't you type that in? If you typed it, you'd be faster.
To PTO, I have to follow board policy. Another question. We have 2 co-chairs, so they can provide an update to the board if they would like. We did meet on the 16th. We selected 4 community members. There's 1 from LaGrange Park, 1 from Brookfield, 1 from Riverside, 1 from North Riverside. 3 of the 4 did attend. I did hear from the 4th there was a conflict last minute. We had a very thorough discussion. We reviewed the current state requirements versus RB requirements, and then about 10 other high school requirements, some of those being from the list that we've been using as similar size schools that we use on some of my projective analysis, as well as schools that ranked higher than us in the top 10 or the top 100 high schools in Illinois, I think off the Sun Times list. You know, it's weird. It's you know, one thing that did come up was you know, schools that are higher performing schools did have some lower requirements than Riverside Brookfield High School, but it's the culture of the high school. I think New Trier, next to the state requirements, had the lowest requirements at 19, yet they have the highest ACT score and the most students going to 4-year schools and some of those things. So the culture really does drive that. I think from what the most part the committee saw, and the co-chairs can speak on this, is that our overall graduation requirements are in line with what most colleges and universities are looking for, so that if a student just met our requirements, they would be college or career ready. That being said, we were the only school who had, we seem to get a little specific in our graduation requirements in regards to like the fine arts survey and the area studies. So we discussed that a little bit, and I think that's where our next discussions will take us. We're also looking at surveying the students as well as the parents in regards to graduation requirements. We're looking for a little more historical perspective. Nick Gale, a department chair who is leaving RB, did a presentation on the fine arts. It was a great presentation. It did, you know, speak about the significance, importance of the fine arts, as well as things that could be attributed to fine arts survey. But I think we also have to take into account, you know, that it's starting to create some conflicts within the schedule and some things like that. And we do have several graduation requirements where students, if they meet other requirements, are allowed to waive out of other graduation requirements, and that is the only graduation requirement that we have no waiver process in place. So that's something we discussed a little bit, and I'm assuming we'll discuss some more. I'd let the co-chairs speak a little bit.
John, you want to go first?
Well, this some data that I wanted was actually, I think we have like maybe the mean or median number of credits students get here, and before we decide if we want to increase or decrease what the requirements would be, we need the data on what that distribution of that curve is. So we need to know how many students or whatever would be affected, and consequently what the financial repercussions of any change would be, which in our environment I think are very important. So at this point, not all the data is there, and I think we had a very productive meeting. I think the other 3 community members that were there had positive contributions, and I think we're moving forward, and I enjoyed doing it with Laura.
I think it was a good meeting. We got off on a nice start. Kevin articulated the goal of that meeting. Staff had great presentations. They were very articulate about their areas and very passionate about their areas. It was very good to hear from each of the departments about that area studies. Was that Mr. Gowans?
Yes.
Was presented such a clear picture. I don't think I had heard such a thorough presentation of the area studies and how it covered things that the other curriculum didn't. And then we had Doug Schultz presented on mathematics, and John had asked him to bring to the next meeting because he goes to national meetings. He's very involved with what's happening at the state and if the state's going to go to 4-year math. So to hear our staff really talk about a vision that they have for the school was very exciting. And as John said, we don't know, our graduation requirements, we don't know how many of our students are taking 20 hours or are taking 26 hours. So we'll get an idea of that distribution. And then John had asked Mr. Schultz to bring back that information from the state, and then we heard for the first time that there's some new assessments the state is talking about and what that will look like for our students. And then again, our committee members from the 3 areas were there. Mr. Lando was there from Brookfield, who sits on the 95 board, and it was exciting to hear because he was concerned that many of the students from the Brookfield area weren't making it into the advanced geometry classes, and we were informed by Doug Schultz that no, that gap has closed. So, that's the good news you want to hear, to see that kind of information come. That meant the articulation between the schools was happening. So I'm excited. We're going to meet again in August and continue that conversation. And like John said, we need to know what the priorities are. Being on the board for 4 years and then off for 2, I know for the 4 years I was on the board, we never had a conversation or looked at the requirements. And in the changing landscape in a new millennium, we never asked, are these things still relevant? And so I think having that conversation, what's important, and then we could start to look at different pricing models. But before we put the pricing model horse in front of the cart, it was a good time to step back and really look at what are the key things that need to be in place.
I prepared the committee, and we talked a little bit as a board, but this might be a committee that's ongoing. I know it's an ad hoc, but it might be ongoing for a while. We might identify in there that we need to put, address some immediate concerns, and then continue this discussion on further as we carry out more discussions and see where we're going financially and some of this stuff. So we talked about August just because of the people's travel schedules and things in June and July. If we think we can pull one off and over the summer, we'll try. But most likely we're going to try to get back together as soon as when school is starting to come back to session in early August. So, that being said, I thought it was a productive meeting.
And if I could just add, first I wanted to clarify, there is a way to waive out of the fine arts survey if you take the proficiency test. And also, it has the highest enrollment in the summer program, just so that you're aware, and we are going to be able to run 2 sections of it because we have right now 31 students and 8 are on a waiting list, so that's at least good news. I thought one of the community members made an excellent comment about you can change the requirements, and it kind of came out of the discussion of some of the schools we were surprised that had the lowest requirements are very high performing schools. And so he asked about, is the change going to really change behavior? And I heard something today that kind of illustrated that point, and that is that we allowed the early release for next year's students. The culture here is so strong with our students trying to take the most rigorous, complete program to prepare themselves. We've only had 8 students request that for next year. So that was something we offered, but again, are you going to change the behavior if something's become enculturated and is of high value? So right now our students are they want a full schedule. And so that was something, or they need it. Perhaps they're credit deficient and they need it. So we have those other things going on. But it was an excellent discussion, and I thought a lot of great ideas came out of it, and we know a little bit more what we want to look at for the future.
Good. Any other questions?